Welcome back to the channel, guys. My name is Casey, and today I want to talk about 10 things I wish I knew as a new 4x4 driver. Over the last few years, it seems like everything related to 4x4ing has exploded. Rock crawling, overlanding, just going camping with your crazy rig, off-roading. I wanted to make a video that I thought would help both beginners and maybe a bit of a refresher for more of the intermediate, advanced, experienced off-roaders out there. First thing, being prepared for an emergency. This is the most important one. Not only is it about preparation, but about what you may be bringing with you. So I think the number one thing that everybody should have in their rig is a first aid kit. This also has to do with having a communication plan, letting others know where you're going, what trail you're running, how long you expect to be on the trail, and when you and your group may be back. This may also include something like a satellite messenger. They are becoming extremely affordable. Almost everyone I know seems to be getting one these days, and that will allow you to send two-way messages, depending on your plan, back and forth to people you know. You can communicate. If something happens, you can send a text message or an email. They also usually have an SOS feature so that if something really bad happens, you can call for search and rescue. Like the one I have from Spot tracks my vehicle, so I can actually leave a link with my wife at home and she can see where the vehicle is anywhere I have access to satellite coverage, so you can kind of follow along. Being prepared also includes knowing how to use your gear that you may be bringing with you. So if you have a winch, knowing that it works, how to operate it, where the remote is, where your recovery gear is, how to connect it up to a vehicle and actually use it. So test all of that stuff before you go out and check it, frequently. And then making sure you have other gear with you, such as emergency blankets, changing clothes in case something happens and you get wet, fire starters if you're gonna be out overnight, or even not overnight and something happens you have to be overnight. It is nice to be able to have a fire. Tire jacks, where your jack is in your vehicle, how to get to it. If you have a lifted, modified off-road vehicle, the factory jack may not work, and getting a flat tire is pretty common out on the trail. Where your tools are, how you gonna get your big tires off, undo the lugs. And then also checking the weather, checking what's going on in the region that you may be going out in. Do you need to prepare for snow or rain? Maybe it's a heat wave. There might be fire bans. All important information for the trails that you may be heading to. And knowing the temperatures and the conditions is super important because it lets you decide what gear you want to go. And don't make any assumptions like I did last year when I went to Death Valley. You'd think it'd be super hot, and at night it was some of the coldest nights that I've ever experienced in my Jeep. But thankfully I had all of my gear with me. Prepare your route, prepare your destinations on a map, have an idea where you're going, be able to share that with somebody, and potentially have some information about the trails that you're heading to. Just checking the trail conditions, making sure things aren't washed out or there's something going on that you didn't know about that could ruin your whole trip. The next one, a little more exciting for you guys getting out in your rig the first time. That is four-wheel drive. When to use four-wheel drive high and low and understanding the difference. And if you have lockers, whether it's rear and front lockers, when to use them. Before you go out, make sure you understand how to put your vehicle into four-wheel drive, how to put it into four-wheel high, and how to put it into four-wheel low. With the Jeeps, you can put it into four-wheel high while you're rolling under a certain speed. If you need to put it in four-wheel low, you have to stop, put your vehicle in neutral, and move it to four low. But you want to be able to understand when you can use those. What are the top speeds that you can use your vehicle in four high, four low, and with lockers. But then once you understand how to use four-wheel drive and your lockers, don't be afraid to use four-wheel drive. It's not a competition to see how far you can get in two-wheel drive, and driving in two-wheel drive can often lead to both stress on your vehicle. It causes trail damage. If you're spinning your tires, maybe you're going through loose gravel or rocks, you're spinning your tires, you're leaving ruts, and you're causing some trail damage. And as well, you can be kicking rocks up. If you've got two-wheel drive, you're spinning your tires a little bit, you may be throwing rocks up behind you and damaging the vehicles behind you. So when the terrain gets a little bit loose, you feel like your tires are slipping, your vehicle might be working a little bit harder, put it in four high. You don't want to be driving around everywhere in four-wheel drive. Generally, you want to be doing that in non-paved surfaces. Now, what about two-wheel drive? What about for low. Well, for low is for when you need more torque and a little bit more control over your vehicle. So potentially you've come up to an obstacle, maybe there's some rocks, maybe there's a gully or a river crossing that you're going through, and you know you're gonna have to get up and out the other side. It's all gonna be slow speed. Well, four-wheel low will give you way more torque. It's going to send the power from your engine and use gear reduction to increase the amount of torque going to your wheels, but you're gonna be moving a whole lot slower. So generally, I don't like to drive around in four low. You'll find that your vehicle goes a lot slower and the throttle is way more sensitive to it, and you shouldn't be driving around in long stretches in four low. I generally reserve moving into four low for an obstacle, or maybe it's getting really, really steep on the trail, and then I'll go into four low. Rock crawling, almost always in four low. The last part of this is lockers. A lot of newer off-road rigs are coming with at least a rear locker. I think the Willys Jeeps have a rear locker. Some of the 4Runner editions, I think the TRD and off-road have rear lockers. If you have a Rubicon, Gladiator, or Wrangler, they'll have front and rear lockers. So when do you use lockers? What benefit do they provide? Generally, if I'm in four low, often I will put my rear locker in. If I'm going over an obstacle, I will just engage my rear locker. It will lock both the driver's side and passenger wheels so they both turn and neither one slips when it starts to lose traction. And that will generally reduce how hard your vehicle has to work to get through something. So you may be able to crawl over it without having to give it more speed than necessary. It'll put less wear and tear and strain on your whole drivetrain, and it will give you more traction to get through the obstacle that you're trying to get over. When you come out of four low, you've completed the obstacle, you turn your lockers back off. You don't want to drive around with your lockers on, just like you don't want to drive around in four low. So what about the front locker? Well, the thing with the front locker is when you turn your front locker on, it's going to lock, once again, both your driver's side and your passenger side tires. When you do this in your Jeep or your off-road vehicle, you're not going to be able to turn very well, because when you turn, the inside wheel needs to turn slower or rotate slower than the outside wheel because it's on a smaller turning radius. When you lock your wheels together, they now turn at the same speed, and it's going to make turning very difficult. And why this is important is if you're going through an obstacle, it is also going to make it very difficult to turn and navigate through an obstacle. So I generally only turn on my front lockers if I've already lined up to what I need to be going through. It's going to be more of a straight line through something, and then I'll add the front lockers along with the rear lockers to give me some extra traction and let me go through the obstacle slower, more controlled, less wear and tear on my vehicle, and less likelihood of something happening because I'm going too fast. Now, with all that said, there are exceptions that you'll kind of figure out as you go, as you gain some experience. Things like in the snow or in the mud, maybe other opportunities to have both your front and rear lockers on. This is going to be something you figure out over time, and I really just want to focus on when you should use four high, when you should use four low, when you should use a rear locker, and when you should use a front locker. Third thing, and I think this is one of the most important and easiest that everybody should be doing when you're out off-roading, but you do need to know a little bit about this before you do it, and that is lowering your tire pressure. When you go out off-roading, as soon as you hit or leave the pavement, hit the trail, you should be airing down. It's not just for going hardcore off-roading and rock crawling. Airing down, in my opinion, has three major benefits. The first one is traction. When you air down, your tires get fatter. You get more tread that is going to hit the surface that you're on. So that is going to give you more traction and allow you to get through things that you wouldn't at full street PSI. Second, it's going to significantly improve your ride quality. So if you're bombing down dirt roads or first resurfaced roads like we spend a lot of time on here in British Columbia, it is going to significantly increase your ride quality. Your tires are part of your entire suspension makeup, so you need to let some air out and let your tires do some of the work before the rest of your suspension starts to take and absorb the bumps. The third thing, and this is based on my opinion, people may agree or disagree with me on this one, but I think airing down low enough helps prevent tire punctures. Think of your tire as a balloon. It's a lot harder to pop a balloon that's half inflated than fully inflated. It's way harder to puncture the sidewall. If a rock hits the side, it's very soft and it'll squish in, and it's much less likely to cause a flat tire. But airing down comes with some things that you need to know. First of all, how are you going to air down? There are a lot of air down tools out there that you can get, that you can screw onto the valves. You can pull the stems out. Some wheels, like I have on my Wrangler, have a little valve that you can open and it airs down to a preset level. As far as what you want to air down to, I generally think that 15 psi is a safe amount of tire pressure to have on a regular rim. I prefer to go a little bit lower, and there's lots of wheels now that are coming out with like a bead grip, which is more like a knurling on the inside of the rim that helps prevent tires from coming off. On my Wrangler, that's what I have, and I'll run between 12 and 14 psi, and I find that a good balance. On the Gladiator behind me, we have what are called bead lock wheels, which actually lock the bead of the tire on so that it cannot slip off even at low psi. And I generally run them between 8 and 10 psi. I can't tell everybody what to air down to because the weight of your vehicle makes a big difference, and the number of plies that your tire is. So how many layers the sidewall and the tread have will make a difference on what amount of psi you need to set your tires to in order to get them to be working both as suspension and widening out and getting more of a tread pattern. But you can kind of test this by airing down in your driveway and just seeing when do your tires start to bow out at the bottom and get wider without dropping below 15 psi. But know that ahead of time and try it out. The last part of this is how do you get your tires back up to road psi, something you want to drive on the highway with. You don't want to drive around for long distances aired down, because now that wider tire pattern on the road is going to generate more friction, more heat, and wear down your tires a lot faster than running at a regular street psi. And so you need to have a plan to air up. There are a lot of air up systems, such as the ones that my friends at Epic Adventure Outfitters make, the Kraken air inflation system, or you can have a CO2 system if you don't mind filling up a bottle occasionally, or perhaps you know where there's a gas station where you can go air up your tires shortly after getting off of the trail. But you want to air them up before you head home any long distances. Okay, next thing. This is a big question that comes up to me all the time, and I wish I knew more about it earlier on before spending a ton of money on gear. But that is the question of buying cheap gear versus buying, well, potentially quality gear or more expensive gear, and knowing when to spend the money versus not spend the money. I think there's a lot of arguments for both sides in this conversation, depending on the type of gear that we're talking about. If we're talking about safety equipment, recovery gear like shackles, toe straps, tree savers, snatch blocks, don't buy cheap gear. Don't cheap out and buy no-name gear that you're going to have to rely on for safety and recoveries and tens of thousands of dollars worth of vehicles that may be attached to it. So areas like safety gear and recovery equipment, I really want to go with well-known manufacturers, gear that has rated working load limits, that's been reviewed and recommended by other enthusiasts in the field. So the other thing that I kind of think about this is, do I need to be 100% relying on that gear to be functioning and working and not break in my trip? If I don't, if it's something that is a nice to have, I may just buy the cheap alternative, maybe the no-name alternative, maybe the Amazon brand of something. There is a lot of good gear that I might use once or twice a year. It isn't going to completely ruin my trip if it doesn't work, but it is kind of nice to have. And this can also apply to like 4x4 mods. There are some mods that I really want to make sure that they're built well, that the welds are done well, and I know it's going to fit when I put it on my vehicle, like bumpers and sliders. But then other stuff sometimes just doesn't really matter. So think about what you're going to be using it for, how much you're going to depend on it, and whether or not safety/recovery is going to be involved when you're considering whether you should buy expensive or quality gear. This kind of actually segues into the next topic, and that is understanding your vehicle before buying useless mods or unnecessary upgrades. I can attest that I've bought just about everything you can possibly think of at one point and tried it out for my Jeeps, for off-roading, for camping, for overlanding. There's a lot of stuff that, I just really didn't need. And especially if you're talking about Jeeps, but a lot of modern 4x4s, 4Runners and Tacomas are extremely capable vehicles out of the box. Go out and use your vehicle the way it is and give it a try. If you can swing it, get a winch. I think a winch is pretty essential. A lot of other things, you'd be surprised whether or not you need them. And over time, you'll get to know the deficiencies in your vehicle, where you're getting hung up, maybe where you're starting to possibly see some damage and you could benefit from some armor, or you'll get an idea of the type of wheeling you enjoy. Maybe you don't like rock crawling and you just want to go exploring and overlanding, or maybe you just want to build a rock crawler. Completely different builds, completely different gear. With how capable vehicles are, especially new Jeeps and Rubicons with 4-low and lockers, they'll go much, much further than you think before you need to start doing upgrades. Now, upgrades are a lot of fun, so maybe you just enjoy modifying and making your vehicle your own, making it the way you want it. That's totally cool too. But if you're really looking for which upgrades to buy first, my honest opinion is, just make sure you got recovery gear, some safety gear. I think a winch is a great first upgrade, and then go use your vehicle and see what you want next. And then you can kind of make your own decisions rather than relying on other people to tell you which mods you should put on your Jeep. Or you can watch one of my videos. If you are looking for mods and you have a Jeep or a Bronco or a Ram, or I think a couple other vehicles, I highly recommend supporting a company that supports the off-road community and supports me making these videos, and that is Metal Cloak. Metal Cloak is a off-road parts manufacturer that's based out of California. They manufacture almost everything in-house, from body armor to suspension kits to bumpers to racks like we have on the Gladiator behind us. And they're just a really awesome company that helps support the community, helps support a lot of the community values around protecting trails. And if you're looking for some mods for your rig, check them out down in the description below. I'll put a link to Metal Cloak's website. Tip number 6. This is kind of a changing one, and I think the rule is still relatively universal, but there are some exceptions which I'll cover. And that is never off-road alone. That's been a long-standing rule for quite a while about not going out by yourself, bringing somebody with you, go with a group or go with a pair. A lot of things can happen, and if nobody's with you, nobody may even know that it happened. You could slide off the side of a cliff and never know what happened to you. Or you could break down and you have no ability to get out of the trail because it's a big break. So that's being a long kind of standing universal rule, but I do think that is changing. And that kind of comes with the help of like satellite communications. With a satellite communicator, you can send a message out if you have a major issue, and perhaps somebody can come and assist you. However, if you really feel like you want to go out alone, make sure that you're sharing your plans, the time you're leaving, the route you're taking, the time you plan to be back, or when you may be back in service to communicate. Also think about where it is you're going. What is the likelihood of running across someone else on the trail while you're out if something happens? The places that I've been off-roading down in the United States, there tends to be a lot more traffic on the trail, and if something happens, I think it's more likely that I come across somebody to help out, or at least help get me some assistance. But a lot of the places that we go up here in British Columbia are super remote, hours away from another city. Odds of us seeing somebody out there are almost zero. And these places are places that I don't feel comfortable going by myself. Even with all of the experience and technology that I have, I always want to bring somebody else with me. Just really think about where you're going, where you're heading. If you're going to go run a trail down in Moab that's well known and full of traffic, yeah, go out, run it by yourself. If something happens, it's going to be super easy to get some help or some support from somebody else. But if you're heading out 100, 200 kilometers out into the bush, definitely bring somebody else with you. Sharing where you're going and having a satellite communications, I don't think is adequate enough if something happens, because you may not be able to use those if something happens that's really bad, and it may be a long time before somebody else comes along and can give you some help. Okay, the next thing that I recommend, number 7, next thing I recommend for new off-roaders, new 4x4s, is go out with some group events, attend some training courses, meet up with some local 4x4 groups, network a little bit. I know you may be wanting to get out off-roading to get away from people, to get away from the city, but this is where you will learn the most. Being around others that know off-roading, no Jeeps, no Toyotas, no camping, no navigation, like all that kind of stuff is going to teach you a lot, and you're going to pick up a lot. I mean, you can learn a lot these days off of watching videos like this on YouTube, but getting out with some of your local groups will help you understand where trails are, trails conditions, places you should and shouldn't go, how to use your rig, how to use your recovery gear. And a lot of 4x4 clubs have events where they may be training days. I know here in British Columbia with the Four Wheel Drive Association of BC, they have different training days they put on. The downside is this is a lot of off-road groups seem to operate on Facebook these days, so you'll probably need to have a Facebook account and log in, but there are a lot of regional groups that you can connect up with and join. And I highly recommend getting involved and meeting some other people that share your hobby, because that, I think, is the best way to learn a lot about the hobby that you want to be doing, particularly off-roading, and especially with knowing about places that you can get to or should be getting to. And it also gives you sort of a network of people for support. The off-road communities that I'm a part of and have talked to are super supportive. If I were to break down on the trail and I needed some assistance, you can't just call a tow truck to come and get you a lot of times. So having friends and people that you can reach out to if something happens on one of your local trails is super beneficial. Just lots of great reasons to get involved with the local communities and support them and help them out, and they'll show you that in return. If you're new to 4x4ing and you're new to an off-road vehicle, read the manual, guys. If you haven't read your vehicle's manual, I highly recommend having a quick look through it. You may learn some things even if you are experienced or have a lot of seat time in your Jeep or your Toyota or whatever it is you're off-roading, Broncos. Take a look at the manual. The manual is going to give you a lot of information that you should know. When you take your rig out and you go off-roading and you go camping or overlanding, something happens, you're the one that's going to need to fix it. And we're not all mechanics. But one way you can get some good knowledge, maybe figure out what's going on, is take a look at the manual. The manual is also going to give you a bunch of information around, like we talked about earlier, how to use your four-wheel drive system, how to use 4-low, how fast you can go in it, what kind of conditions you should be operating in 4-high versus 4-low. It's going to give you different fuse ratings, fuse locations, electrical information, maintenance information. There's just tons of good stuff in the manual, and I bet most of you guys have never ever even cracked open the manual. Have a look through it. You might learn something about your Jeep or your off-road vehicle, not just Jeeps. And if you're new and you just bought a Jeep or Bronco, crack it open, have a look, make sure you understand everything that's in there, and you'll learn a lot about the new vehicle you just purchased before you head out on your first off-road adventure. 2 more things. Number 8. Now, we talked about one of the most essential mods, or one of the things that I would recommend first beyond a safety kit and first aid kit and recovery gear, and that is a winch. So if you have a winch, if you purchase a winch, and I highly recommend you purchase a winch because it can get you out of a lot of things and give you a lot more confidence using your off-road vehicle, because you're not as concerned about being stuck once you understand how to use it. And that is sort of this point of number 8. Don't be afraid to winch, guys. If you have a winch on your vehicle, use it. If you need to get out of something, there's no pride that's lost by using your winch. Using your winch can prevent a lot of things, like breaking something on your Jeep. If you're stuck and you're just giving it gas and trying to get out of there, rocking it back and forth, I mean, you're opening up for opportunities to break something in your driveline. As well, you can get put in situations where you may damage your Jeep. Maybe you'll slide sideways on an obstacle into something you didn't want to and end up with a big old dent in the side of your rig. I use my winch all the time, and the more you use it, the more confident you get with it, the less stressed out you'll be going through obstacles thinking you might get stuck and now you got a winch. It's not a big deal. As well, if there's a bunch of people behind you, you don't want to be just sitting there beating on the trail all day trying to get through something, if you've given it a couple attempts, it looks like your vehicle's not getting through it, hop out, pull some winch line, get some experience using your winch, and get out of that obstacle and keep everybody flowing through the trail and moving along. As well, it's going to cut down on trail damage. If you're just having to pin the gas, spin it, you're trying your lockers, you're rocking back and forth, you're probably doing some damage to the trail, or you're changing the trail, you're moving dirt, you're moving rocks around, and it's changing it for the people that are going to come through it. Next, as well, if everybody did that, it would just completely erode the trails. Hop out, pull some winch line, get your vehicle out of there, and move along with your day. And don't worry about it. It's not a failure to use your winch. Everybody does it, and at some point you will too. So you might as well get some experience doing it where you can. All right, last tip I have for you guys, number 10. If this is your first time out, things I wish I knew more about my vehicle and off-roading when I go out, and that is, don't be so aggressive on the throttle. You don't need to just rip it and pin it to get through obstacles. The old saying is, as slow as possible and as fast as necessary. Learn how your vehicle behaves, how momentum carries you over things, how much momentum you need to get over a crest, or how much momentum and when you need to start applying throttle to get up and over something. You don't need to take huge runs at stuff to get over it, especially if it's your first attempt. Take your first attempt a little bit slower and trying to understand where you're failing. Is it speed? Is it line? Is it positioning? Is it just you messed up? You don't need to be super aggressive with your vehicle. The faster you're going, the more opportunity is going to occur for breaking something in your drive line, whether it's a U-joint or axle shaft, ring and pinion, all that kind of stuff. The faster you're going, the more speed, the more momentum all your tires have, your vehicle has, the more likelihood of something breaking in your vehicle. And then as well, the faster you're going, the harder it is to control your vehicle. You have more opportunity to be in the wrong position, maybe cause some body damage. I watch a lot of videos where people are just spinning their tires, chucking mud up in the air, throwing rocks around, bouncing around, going over a big rock obstacle when you could, put it in four-wheel low, throw all your lockers on, and potentially crawl your way through that. At least give it a try. It's much better than damaging your vehicle or breaking something, because that, especially when you break something, can really, if you break a U-joint or a ring and pinion, everybody's going to be stopped and it's going to take forever to get your vehicle off. So try obstacles out. Learn how your vehicle carries speed, how it carries momentum, and how it can get through things, and try and fail first. You don't want to just go blasting through that stuff. And if you're not sure, or you're the first one in the group, you're first one at the obstacle, don't be afraid to stop and hop out, guys. It's not a race. Off-roading is not a race. Hop out, evaluate the obstacle. Take a look. Where might the line be? Where have other people driven through? Are there tire tracks already? Are there black marks on the rock? Make sure you know how deep the water is, before you do a significant water crossing, all that kind of stuff. If you just go blasting through a huge, what looks like puddle or river, you may hit a huge deep section. All of a sudden you've sunk your Jeep, taken on water, and it's just a bad day. You're going to have a lot of problems when that happens. So slow down. Don't be aggressive. It's not a race. Know your obstacle before you go through it. Know how your vehicle carries weight and momentum. Try to, reduce damaging the trails, your vehicle, other people's vehicles, and keep the group moving. Have a good day and have a lot of fun. So let me know if you have any questions. Leave them down below. I'll do my best to answer them. I upload new videos, guys, every week, and we're trying to hit 100,000 subscribers. I could use your help. It costs you nothing. Take 1 second. Hit that subscribe button for me. I'd appreciate it a ton. And stay tuned next week for the next video.